I said everything gonna be alright. I said everything gonna be alright.
Everything's gonna be alright. Good day wherever you're listening from, and welcome to Indoor Air Quality Radio, IAQ Radio, for Friday, September 16th, 2016. This week is episode 431. My name is Radio Joe Hughes. I am at the Central City Studio D. The Z-Man is calling in from Studio C back in McKees Rocks. Cliff, do we have you on the line?
I'm here, Joe. Hello, everybody.
Great. Welcome, Cliff. The Z-Man Zlotnick, our engineer, John, you got to have faith, is remote today, but we think it's going to work. Today's guests are going to be IAQA Past President Don Weeks, In-Air Environmental up in Canada, and IAQA Executive Director Stephanie Sears, talking a little bit about IEQ issues around the world, and then a little update on the IAQA and their strategic plans. Before we get started, of course, we couldn't do the show without our marquee sponsors.
John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at their website, jondon.com. That's jondon.com.
Clean Facts, the #1 information source for cleaning and restoration professionals. Check them out at cleanfactswithanx.com.
IAQ.net and Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions are available at IAQ.net. Please be sure to thank our sponsors for their support of IAQ Radio when you inquire about their services and products.
And last but not least, you can check out the IAQ Training Institute website for the most current dates for the training you trust at IAQtraining.com. I will be in Kansas City next week. We've got several classes out there. Look forward to working with the guys at Children's Mercy Hospital. And don't forget to check out the Healthy Building Summit that's coming up in a little over a month from now. Before we bring our guest on, let's turn it over to the Z-Man for today's IAQ Radio trivia question.
Thanks, Joe. Win a cool prize by outcompeting fellow IAQ Radio listeners and being the first person to correctly answer the IAQ Radio trivia question each week. Submitting your answer is easy. Either email it to czlotnick@cs.com, or if you're listening to the show live, you can text in the answer via your computer. Congratulations to John Lapotere, IAQ Solutions, Orlando, Florida, for answering last week's IAQ Radio trivia question. The IAQ Radio trivia question for Friday, September 16, 2016, has been sponsored by Ideas, the solution chemistry company, creating unique solutions to odor removal, surface cleaning, and decontamination problems. The question is, who was the first president of the IAQA? Back to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Well, today we've got two. Well, Don has been a regular. Stephanie's been on one other time, but Don is at In-Air Environmental. He's their certified industrial hygienist. He's been providing environmental, occupational, health and safety training, consulting for over 35 years now. He's affiliated with the American Industrial Hygiene Association, past chair of their Indoor Environmental Quality Committee, a fellow of the association, 4-time recipient of the Bestseller Award for the Report of the Microbial Task Force in 2001, 2002, and the Green Book, Recognition, Evaluation, and Control of Indoor Mold, 2008. Stephanie Sears is currently serving as the Executive Director of IAQA, and she has in the past worked as the Director, Global Operations, Business Planning and Analysis at Equifax, and prior to that, she spent 10 years at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Cliff, we've got some music for the guests. that's appropriate. Both of our guests just back from India, and Cliff always comes up with something appropriate. Welcome. Let's make sure we've got Dawn.
Hello.
Good day, Dawn, and Stephanie.
Yes, hello.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Okay, you've both been on in the past, but, the last time, Stephanie, you were on with, I think it was David Underwood and Kent Rawhauser, and we were talking a little bit about the ASHRAE IAQA Conference down in, I guess it was Orlando. Never really got to talk to you in much detail, and I thought maybe today we'd start with that. Tell us a little bit about what you did at Equifax, if you would. Did you travel a lot, go around the world?
Actually, I should probably start with my time at ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. That's where I did most of my international business travel. I was fortunate enough to be involved with an institute of ASME that was extremely international. So they had regular events and technical conferences in Europe and North America, and during my time there, I helped them expand into Asia, including India. So that's kind of my past connection and experience to India. When I was at Equifax, I traveled mostly domestic.
Oh, okay. And Dawn, if you could give back listeners a little background on your international travels. I know you get around a good bit. What areas have you been to with, when you were doing indoor air quality or either work or attending conferences, etc.?
Thanks, Joe. First, I must say that this is my 10th wedding anniversary, so I'd be remiss if I didn't wish Lan Chi, who's supposedly listening, happy anniversary, 10th wedding anniversary. So
nice.
I'll be seeing her later today.
Happy anniversary, Lan Chi. Thanks for letting him join us for an hour here.
I started traveling internationally back in the early 90s, starting to attend some of the ISIAQ indoor air conferences and the Healthy Buildings conferences. And I've been to conferences now in Finland, Portugal, Scotland, Australia, Hong Kong, China. So I've gotten around a fair amount to see what the types of issues people are encountering in various locations other than just here in North America. And of course, internationally, I'm also from Canada, so actually, to some extent, I guess I'm an international man of mystery, I guess, in terms of going around and doing things in different places.
You are, and originally from here in the States, correct?
That's right, yeah. I grew up in the New York City area and then lived in Connecticut for 20 years, so I do have good U.S.-based ancestry as well as having some international experience.
Let's start with that, Dawn. What's the difference between IEQ in the United States and IEQ in Canada, if there is a difference?
Well, in the difference is that in the United States, indoor air quality, in general, when you get to the governmental side of things, it's usually a guideline of one sort or another. Either it's something that's been issued by the U.S. EPA or by OSHA or by HUD or CDC, or in some cases professional societies such as AIHA and other associations like that. In Canada, there are still guidelines in some cases, but most of the guidelines that are issued by provincial governments. So in Ontario, we have the Ministry of Labor. In Quebec, we have another agency that deals with labor issues as well as health issues, and then you're basically working with two sets of regulations that are going to be different. A good example is Legionella. In Quebec, because of an incident that took place in 2013, they have very strict sampling regulations with regards to cooling towers for Quebec, and so you need to follow those when you're dealing with a building in Quebec. In Ontario, the regulations aren't in place as yet, or the guidelines are not in place. So we revert back to the federal guidelines, which are issued by an agency called Public Works, similar to GSA in the United States. So it's a different environment. You're dealing with a variety of different types of regulations, guidelines in Canada, whereas there's a tendency in the United States to be a little bit more federal in terms of the approach, although certainly there are states that have their own regulations as well. So I just find it's much more difficult in some cases to know exactly what your jurisdiction is in any particular situation.
Stephanie, when you were with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, I'm curious, this has been probably, 15 years ago now. Did you hear much about indoor air quality? I mean, these are mechanical engineers. Obviously, they deal with it, whether they, focus on it or not. What was your kind of background, introduction to indoor air quality working with that group?
Well, I mentioned I worked for an institute of ASME, and that institute was the International Gas Turbine Institute. Oh. So my focus the whole time there was around turbo machinery and gas turbines. And there's not a lot of indoor air quality conversations going on in the turbo machinery community.
I see. Okay. And now, you were recently in India, both of you, and maybe, Steph, if you could tell listeners a little bit about why you were in India and maybe some of your impressions with respect to their indoor and outdoor air quality.
Yeah, most definitely. We were approached by a group of professionals in the IAQ industry in India. They were interested in becoming involved with IAQA and having the ability to not only tap into the professional network that IAQA has, but also to leverage many of our educational resources as an association. Over in India, they have, as I'm sure many people know, a very severe problem with their outdoor air quality. I believe Mumbai just surpassed Beijing or Shanghai as the most polluted city in the world. So they have a severe issue with that in India. And of course, the outdoor air quality impacts the indoor air quality. So it's something that's a very pertinent issue in India. And so we were approached by a group of people working in that industry in India to see about a partnership. The more conversations we had, the more we thought that one of the solutions to kind of bridge the gap between what we're doing in North America and India was to form a chapter there. So Don and I went over, and one of the things that we did was we instituted the new chapter. But another thing that we did was we spent a few days in Delhi talking to government officials at the national level, as well as others involved in the IAQ industry based in Delhi, about their issues in India and how IAQA could get more involved. And the good thing about India is there's so much opportunity there. There's a lot of room for us to, share our knowledge and help them with the issues they're facing, not only with the outdoor air quality, but also they have a lot of issues stemming from the high levels of humidity in the country.
And either one of you, if you could help me out a little bit here, you mentioned Delhi, Gully, and Mumbai, and which is the capital? Is it still Delhi or Don?
It's actually right next door to Delhi. It's called New Delhi, and that's where most of the federal facilities that we visited were located. Okay. But it's one large conglomerate of city. About 20 million people live in the New Delhi area.
And what's the climate in that part of India? Because I don't think people realize how big India is. I mean, you've got I don't know if it's as big as the United States, but north to south, I believe there's, quite a few different climates.
Yes, we were in the central northern plain area where Delhi is located. Certainly, on the time we were there, which was August, it was monsoon season. That was one of the first things that we we encountered as we got off the airplane is that they had a lot of monsoon season sales at that point. So it was very, very cloudy, very warm, very humid time. That lasts from about August through about October, and then actually after that it becomes a little bit milder during the late fall and early winter months, and then in the early spring again it becomes very, very hot. But you're right, the climate varies from the foothills of the Himalayas all the way down to the furthest end of the peninsula. Can be runs from basically highlands or mountainous type zones all the way down to semi-tropical and tropical zones, which are in the southern part of the country.
Interesting. All right, let's talk a little more about India. I think that's a fascinating area. First, I'm not sure, Stephanie. I've been to, I think, all but one of the last 15 IAQA conferences, and there were a few before I got involved, but I don't recall seeing too many people from India. Have any of the people you met with been over here to our convention, and what were their thoughts if they were?
Yes, actually, Richie Mittal, who is the chapter director for the IAQA India chapter, came over and attended the Orlando annual meeting. He also attended ASHRAE's ASHRAE's annual meeting in the summertime, where IAQA had a board meeting. So Richie Mittal, along with a few of the other chapter officers, we met with them in St. Louis during ASHRAE's annual meeting, and a few of them had also attended the IAQA annual meeting in Orlando. We spoke to many people in India about coming over to the annual conference in 2017, which will be in January in Las Vegas. So we're hoping that slowly over the years, that contingency will continue to grow at the annual meeting.
Either one of you, what kind of, I don't know if you got a chance to ask him what his impressions were of the differences between, how we handle indoor air quality in the States and how it's handled in India. Can one of you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that the difference right now is that we have about 25, 30 years of effort, maybe even longer now, since the early 80s, effort within North America to improve the indoor air quality from the time of the initial energy crisis back in the late 70s until now. We've been working very steadily in growing the indoor air quality field in North America and in Europe and in what I would be called the developed countries. In India, their development has really skyrocketed over the last 10 years in terms of their industry. They're now the fastest growing economy in the world, faster than China. And so the increase in awareness of indoor air quality has become widespread among the particularly people who work in the IT field, but also those who work in office buildings. They can see, if you recall, Joe, growing up in places like Pittsburgh or in Los Angeles and places like that, we used to have a regular smog, even though that was associated with those cities.
Sure,
we've seen a substantial reduction of that kind of activity in North America. Well, they're experiencing that now. They're seeing the problems with smog. They're seeing the problems with outdoor pollution, and because of the fact that they are so the cities are so highly populated, that obviously is also affecting their indoor air quality, and the awareness of indoor air quality is growing very, very strongly right at the moment. But they haven't necessarily gotten to the point where they have regulations, or they haven't gotten to the point where they have done much in terms of controls at this point, because their focus has been on dealing with the particularly particulates in the air, PM10, PM2.5. And they're also talking about doing something as low as PM1 in terms of the types of controls that they're looking to try to reduce the outdoor pollution, which is also affecting their indoor environments as well.
Cliff, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I do, Don. In the United States and in Canada, some of our indoor air quality problems are attributed to the tightening up of buildings and homes for energy savings. Are they concerned about energy savings in India, and are they doing the same things that we did in order to tighten the buildings?
They are. We were in one building in Delhi that was a platinum, LEED platinum dynamic building, which means that they monitor everything, with regards to indoor air quality inside the building in all their approximately 7 or 8 stories. And this is a new development for them in terms of monitoring in that regard. And so, yes, they're definitely seeing an increase in awareness of indoor air quality. They recognize that the problem is going to be widespread. One of the biggest problems that they have is what is known as cook stoves. These are cooking devices where they both from the urban and from the rural areas, they have these cook stoves running in many cases almost all day long, and they're using biomass instead of any type of other types of fuel, and that's creating an incredible amount of smoke and problems within the buildings. And they're trying to deal with that, but it's a very difficult issue because the cooking is a very integral part of their culture and the type of food that they eat. And so dealing with the smoke, which is causing severe problems with asthma and other carbon monoxide problems, is really a difficult issue for them to deal with because it's so culturally entangled in their way of doing domestic cooking and things of that nature. But it's very much an issue that they're very focused in on right at the moment.
Thank you.
I'm curious, either one of you, what type of construction was kind of predominant, at least in the areas you were in? I assume you were pretty much in those big cities, and I'm assuming, but correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a lot of concrete, you've got a lot of slab-type foundations, you've got a lot of multi-story type buildings. I'm not sure what type of insulation they use. Can one of you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was fascinating to me was the contrast between the new and the old. The new is the type of construction you're describing, with concrete and windows and very tight controls on the environment. When I was talking with Cliff, I should have mentioned also that a lot of these newer buildings are very concerned about energy savings as well. Obviously, it's a very expensive place to air condition in terms of keeping the climate under control. So they are very concerned about that, and they want to focus in on that. However, you contrast that with the older buildings that are in a vast part of the cities that we were in, and you can see that the older construction was not intended to be closed in. It was intended to be open, quite frankly, to allow things to dry out, to allow things to have breezes, to basically allow interaction between the outdoors and the indoors. And so that type of construction still exists in a large part of the cities. The newer construction is supplanting that as time goes on, but it's going to take you're dealing with populations is close to 1 billion people. It's very difficult to see how quickly you can get to going from the old type of construction to the new type of construction in a rapid fashion. They are trying very hard. I mean, every place we went to, there was construction going on. So I think they're seeing it as a necessity in order for them to modernize their society.
Cliff?
Thanks, Joe. One of the things that I've China, other parts of Asia, where the scaffolding is unlike the scaffolding that's used in the United States, where we use Safeway scaffolding and it's pretty much the same in all the different cities. It seems that in Asia that they use a lot of bamboo type scaffolding, and I was just wondering what types of scaffolding that you saw for new construction. Well,
for new construction, there is a bit of a change from the old bamboo type of scaffolding to more modernized scaffolding, because a lot of the new construction is being financed by people who are coming from from a more modern viewpoint on this, both from Indian viewpoint and also from folks who are investing in India. However, you do still see buildings that are under repair, the older buildings I mentioned, where you do see the bamboo scaffolding as well. I would say that it doesn't look as strong as the other newer type of scaffolding, but having gone on one or two of them over the years, I'm very surprised at how strong it actually is. I'm not saying it's perfect. Believe me, it's not perfect, but it is a good substitute in many ways for the traditional for the type of scaffolding that we're used to in Western culture, and it works very well for reconstruction. Many of the buildings that they have.
Thanks.
One more quick question on the building science and construction, because I think it helps to understand that before we get into too much detail on indoor air quality. Did you see much in the way of drywall, sheetrock, whatever we're going to call it, ceiling tile, carpet? How would you compare what you saw in India to what you see in North America, Stephanie?
Well, I'll start on that. Basically, if you're in a modern hotel, as we were in some cases, these are hotels that have been put up in many cases within the last couple of years, you're going to see that type of construction because the folks that are building them are familiar with that kind of construction from doing it in other places. If you go to the more traditional type of hotels and buildings that we've been in, it's much more of a marble and concrete type of construction, less more drywall, less carpeting than you would expect. The most interesting thing that I found was that at least two of the hotels we stayed in were LEED Platinum hotels. They met the requirements for LEED Platinum, which meant that they have gone through the process through the USGBC or the Indian Green Building Council to get that kind of award, and it's prominently displayed in their lobby. So they're very proud of the fact that these hotels have met those requirements.
Stephanie, I'm curious what we've got a little bit before we go to our halftime here. I'm curious what your thoughts were with respect to the accommodations. I mean, was it what you expected, a little less so? And have you been to India prior with your ASME job?
Yes, I was in India in 2012 with ASME, but only in Mumbai. So this was a good trip because it gave us exposure to some different parts of India, because Don and I spent a few days in Delhi, and then we actually flew down to Goa for ASHRAE's Tech Fest conference. And Goa is a resort town in India. It's on the coast. And that was a very different environment because it's actually a tropical climate zone. And there are extreme levels of humidity there. So there's a little bit of a difficulty, I think, in maintaining acceptable levels of humidity, or what we would consider acceptable in the United States. So that was a different experience there, to stay in that tropical climate in India and really experience the extremes of their weather.
And yeah, I've got enough time for a quick follow-up. Dawn, you're an indoor air quality guy. I mean, I don't want to be negative toward the country at all. But I'm curious, did you get a lot of musty odor even in the newer hotels, or did it seem like it was pretty good to you?
Actually, I was pleasantly surprised that most of the hotels, or all the hotels that we stayed in, had nothing of a musty odor to them. Now, I'm not going to deny that there are other ones. I mean, if you go on TripAdvisor and look up hotels in India, you're going to find a lot of information about moldy buildings and moldy rooms, and they're well aware that there are going to be needs for new construction in these areas. But for the hotels that we stayed in, I would say we were pleasantly surprised not to have any major problems in that particular area. It wasn't very musty at all.
Did either of you get any impression from the people you met with, or maybe your interaction with people who were, behind the desk or whatever at the hotels? Is there any awareness of mold as an indoor air quality issue?
Well, yes, I think that they're very much aware of living in a very humid climate, subject to monsoons on a regular basis, and the older construction that we talked about that are more wood and other types of cellulose-based materials. They're going to have those types of problems. It's a different way of looking at things. Is that in many ways mold, although it's certainly present in these environments, is not necessarily as considered to be as severe a problem as the particulates problem that we talked about earlier, because it's something you can see with particulates. You can see it in the air. You can see that if you get outside of Delhi and you drive back towards the city, you can see the cloud that hangs over the city. So it's a very visible problem, and I think it's not unusual when you think about it. Again, like I talked about in North America, we dealt with the outdoor environment, the smog, the problems with the particulates first before we started focusing more on the indoor air quality problems such as mold and things like that. So I think they're following a very similar pattern in that regard.
And I would imagine dealing with the indoor air quality when you've got such a large outdoor air quality problem is going to be a little tricky. And what I'd like to do is talk about that, mechanical systems and ventilation a little bit, after we take a break and thank our sponsors. We'll be back with the second half of our interview with Don Weeks and Stephanie Sears. Give us about 90 seconds. And thanks to our association sponsors, the Indoor Air Quality Association, a nonprofit multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Visit them at IAQA.org.
The Restoration and Specialty Cleaners Association, who have been serving the needs of and advocating for their members for over 30 years. Remember, Triska is your link to industry training, certification, standards, and events. Their website is trsca.org. Thanks to our advertisers.
Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, who use advanced sensor technology and embedded computers to provide superior environmental test instrumentation. Visit them at wolfsense.com.
Legends Environmental Insurance Services, the experts in insurance for environmental consultants and contractors for over 20 years. Visit them at legends-enviro.com.
And Particles Plus. They are engineers and manufacturers of feature-rich particle counters, air quality monitoring instrumentation, and vacuum pump technology. ParticlesPlus.com. Count on us.
And, of course, our marquee sponsors. John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at their website, jondon.com. That's jondon.com.
CleanFacts, the #1 information source for cleaning and restoration professionals. Check them out at cleanfacts.com.
IAQ.net and Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions are available at IAQ.net. Please be sure to thank our sponsors for their support of IAQ Radio when you inquire about their services and products.
All right, we're back for the second half of our interview with Don Weeks and Stephanie Sears. We left off, we were talking about the indoor air, outdoor air, and the fact that, and we still deal with outdoor air problems here with, in Houston and Los Angeles and some of the larger metropolitan areas. Probably not as bad as Mumbai, but Don, I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on how that affects how they look at ventilation versus how we look at ventilation in North America?
Well, we have been moving in our commercial buildings and also our residential buildings in the United States and in Canada. We've been moving very strongly towards mechanical system ventilation for the most part, and that has been going on for probably 40, 50 years. One of the things that they say about why the South part of the United States grew so quickly in the last 30, 40 years is because the advent of air conditioning. And certainly that's a key factor there. They're office buildings that we were in do have ventilation and do have mechanical ventilation in almost all cases that we were in. So they have the types of systems in place. That is less so in residential. We didn't visit very many, but we did go past many residential areas, and I didn't see as many mechanical systems. There are certainly individual air conditioning units that you see in the windows and things of that nature. I mean, it's an extremely hot and extremely humid environment, so anything you can do to do that is important. But one of the key things that has changed and is quite different than what we have in North America is the whole idea of air purifiers. There's a huge industry for air purification, small units that they use in both residential and in commercial buildings. And there's a problem because these air purifiers make claims that probably, well, in most cases, are not necessarily true. That they can eliminate all pollution or all mold or all particulate, by operating these purifiers. And so that industry is something that particularly the folks in India that are now setting up the chapter for IAQA are very interested in and are looking to perhaps put together a paper about how to select air purifiers so that people can be a little bit more aware. One of the things that they told us was that the type of air purifier you bought was dependent on how much you could spend. So if you spend, have $500 to spend, that's the purifier you get. If you have $1,500 to spend, that's the purifier you get. So they didn't have any other criteria other than, well, this is a more expensive one, and that's the reason why I bought it, not necessarily that it did a better job. So they're looking to perhaps put something in place that will give consumers as well as professionals a little bit more guidance as to how to pick out air purifiers.
Did you notice, were these all filter type purifiers, or did you get ozone generators and,
yeah. They're definitely ozone generators too. I mean, they're both filters and ozone generators. They're ultraviolet in some cases. I mean, they had all different types, but it depended on where you were and what type of industry you were in. In restaurants, you ended up more with the filter types, but in residence, from what I've been told at least, they're dealing more with the ozone generators to reduce odors as well as take the pollution out, or supposedly take the pollution out of the air. So it's a wide open field. They have their own domestic manufacturers, but they have a lot of influx from China also in terms of air purifiers, which is not unusual, is to be expected because China has been using air purifiers since I was first there in 2005 and saw them then. So it's a big industry in India, and they're selling a lot of them. And what the IAQA India chapter would like to do is to put some kind of paper together that helps people to pick out the right one without necessarily just doing on the basis of price.
I'm curious, Don, in the bigger, the commercial buildings, did you see? Were you able to get a look at or talk about the type of filtration they're using? Are they, are they using the MERV rating system? Are they using both particulate and VOC type filtration in these buildings? Let me talk a little bit more about that, if you would.
I would. I basically, my discussion, I didn't necessarily get to go too much into mechanical rooms myself personally, but from talking to a lot of the mechanical engineers that attended the conference, and also, talking with Richie and some of the other folks that are putting together the Indoor Air Quality Association chapter, their focus is mainly still very much on particulates rather than on VOCs at this point. Mm-hmm. They recognize that, and as I said earlier, they're going from an environment where they were first focused on PM10, they're down to PM2.5, and some of the regulators had discussing the idea of having a PM1 type of standard with regards to how to go about cleaning the air of the particulates. So their focus right now is focused on that, and it's a very good reason. The amount of vehicles that they have on the road it's astronomical. I mean, you can range it from large trucks down to taxi cabs to private cars to little putt-putt freewheelers to carts that are being pulled by donkeys. I mean, everybody gets on the road. There is nothing in terms of delineation of lines. You just go where you want to drive, and you try to move forward. And of course, all those people are in most cases are not necessarily operating a clean vehicle, and so you have a phenomenal amount of particulate going up in the air from just transportation.
Interesting. I'm wondering. Okay, we're at 12:40 here. I want to kind of wrap up the indoor environmental quality worldwide. So maybe, and then we're going to go into a little more with Stephanie on IAQA. Before we do, Dawn, can you kind of give us a little comparison, contrast between China and Asia? The parts of Asia you've been in, and India, indoor air quality wise.
Well, the most recent visit I was in Hong Kong in 2014. Now, Hong Kong is an incredibly vertical city on an island, and the most striking thing to me was that all of these buildings, which are almost all modern, are mechanically ventilated, and so you have an incredible amount of cooling towers and other types of HVAC units sitting on roofs and on sides of buildings. We went through one area of Hong Kong, which was a very intense area called Chulan, where it's the most densely populated part of the world, according to what I was reading. And we walked through one of these buildings which had an arcade underneath, which was outdoors. Yet when we walked in that arcade, the air conditioning system was on and was blowing down on us on the outside of the building. Okay, so we were getting cooled as we were walking through the middle of the building without necessarily being in the building. That doesn't happen in India. I mean, that type of I would say not very good use of energy does not happen in India. They're building buildings, as I said, that are much more tight, much more. And in the LEED certification buildings that we're in, you can see where the ventilation system is very tightly controlled. Even the convention center we were in Goa, it was a system that was intended to be operated with energy efficiency being one of the key issues. So I see India actually moving more towards the direction of being energy efficient than what I was seeing in Hong Kong, where it seemed like they still are kind of in the era of cheap oil and cheap energy. So it's a contrast, but Hong Kong is a great city to be in as well. It's just very different in terms of what you see there as opposed to what you see in India. And
real quick, you've been to Europe quite a few times, I believe. What are your thoughts on Europe versus, say, North America? Very similar, quite different?
Well, the big difference over there is that they took the energy crisis of the late 70s very seriously and spent a great deal of money upgrading their transportation systems in particular and building a very good rail system between cities. It's a smaller area than North America, obviously, so that they could do that and interconnect cities very well. And they've also raised the price of gasoline through taxes or for other means to basically make it so that if you were going to drive in Europe, you're going to pay a fair amount of money for that drive. We haven't necessarily done that in the United States. As I can see, just driving around in the United States right now, it's about $2 a gallon for oil, for gasoline, I should say. Mm-hmm. That you would never see that in Europe. I mean, Europe is at least 2 to 3 or 4 times that price. So there's more of a premium on public transportation. There's definitely more regulations. It's much more of the EU regulations are very strict in terms of what kind of facility you can build and what you have to do with your pollution. We're a lot less restricted in the United States, even though people complain about our regulations, and believe me, I understand why they do. In comparison to places like Europe, we're much less restricted in terms of what we do. that doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. It just means that we have a different approach than they did. They had more of a regulatory approach. We have more of a market-based approach. Both can work. It's just a matter of how they work and the difference that you can see between the two environments.
Do you still see a lot of research going on and coming out of Europe? Like, I know, years ago, that was a hotbed of research, and it seems like, at least in my experience, North America, we're getting more indoor air quality type research, et cetera. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, definitely. Many of the individuals that started programs in Europe, in Finland, and in Denmark, and elsewhere, many of them have come to North America and worked with universities here to build programs. Plus, there's been a lot of growth of our own internal programs, people who have graduated from programs here who are starting to do really impressive research. The real growth area, again, though, goes towards towards Asia. We're seeing a number of papers. If you look at some of the publications from ISIAQ and other organizations, you're seeing a number of papers that are being issued by folks in Beijing, Shanghai, and now over into India as well. So I think North America has caught up to Europe. Europe is still strong, but it's not as strong as it was. And I think Asia is the up-and-coming player in terms of indoor air quality research.
One final comment or question, Don. My impression is, I don't go around the world like you do. I've been to a couple places, but my impression about China and India is that they kind of are leaning on or very interested in trying to solve these problems through new technologies and so on, and not so much. I don't see that as much here in the States, or that's my impression. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'll give you a very small but important thing that I have seen a difference, and it's not really related to indoor air quality, but it's related to technology. In the United States, when you buy something for a credit card, generally you still swipe the card. You still put it through a side vent, or you stick your card into the machine. The technology is advanced beyond that, where everybody does. Even in Canada, we just do a tap on the machine, and it takes all the information right directly from a pin. The United States is falling a little bit behind on those types of things. I don't know why that is the case, because obviously a lot of things in the United States are still state of the art, the new iPhone 7 and things like that. But it does seem like there's more early adapters in places such as Japan, China, and other places, and they have. Another example is telephone service. I mean, there's very few people in the most rural parts of China who don't have a smartphone. What they don't have is they don't have a land phone. There's no need for a land phone. They just gone directly from basically not having a phone at all directly to a smartphone. We still, in many cases, have, in most of our homes and our businesses, we still have landlines. And they don't have that. Everything's operated on a cell phone. So they have been early adapters in terms of that technology, and I think they will be the same way when it comes to indoor air quality. I mentioned the dynamic LEED platinum building that we visited in India. I don't know of anybody in the United States or North America that has done dynamic LEED at this point. So having that kind of technology succeed in places like New Delhi is a real good example of how they really are working towards working with new technology very quickly.
Don, real quick, could you tell listeners the difference between a LEED platinum and a LEED dynamic platinum?
The dynamic part is that they monitor throughout the entire building a number of different types of indoor air quality parameters: carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, VOCs, total particulates, formaldehyde, things of that nature. And you can see the display at the front door. Okay, they have a display, a big screen TV that shows basically what the levels are within the building. So that's the dynamic part. They can, if they see a problem in any of those areas, they can immediately go and correct the problem. So it's not only just getting the LEED certification; they actually are keeping the certification going all the way through with these monitoring devices that they use.
And what numbers are they using with respect to, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide? Are they using ASHRAE numbers, or are they using stuff directly from the LEAD program?
Generally speaking, they're using the ASHRAE numbers for the most part, but in some cases there's not an ASHRAE number. They'll have a local number that they've generated, or they'll use something from LEAD directly. Like
total VOCs. I don't believe there's an ASHRAE number on that. Is that accurate?
That's correct. There's not one on humidity either, but basically they'll use what I would consider guidelines, but they're using it in a proactive way, whereas many of the other buildings are doing it more of in a reactive way. So this is a relatively new development. It's only been out for about 2 years, and this is one of the first buildings I see where has used it very effectively.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Don. And Stephanie, before we move into IAQA a little more, I want to make sure I give you a chance to add anything with respect to, what you saw in India and around the world indoor environmental quality-wise.
Yeah, I think it's interesting is just the segmentation of the IAQ in India, because the issues that they have that they're tackling in the urban areas are very different from those that they're looking at in the rural areas. I mean, Don touched on the cook stoves. That is seen within the urban areas, but it's mostly an issue within the rural areas of India. So you have a lot of pollution, of course, in any urban area. They have it from the landfills and from the industry and from the vehicles, but there's also a large amount of the air pollution that's coming from the rural areas because of the cook stove. And there's the additional complication of having those cook stoves inside the home. With young children and elderly people alike that are, specifically prone to issues. And so that was, to me, in India, one of the most interesting parts of it. And also, as Don touched upon, the issue with the cook stoves with IAQ, that is a particularly difficult one to tackle because it's so entrenched in their culture. Another thing that's interesting is during the Indian festival of Diwali, that is one of the most polluted times of the year in India because of all of the fireworks and things that are set off and burnt as part of the festival. But that is another thing that deeply impacts their air quality that's entrenched in their culture. So it's going to be an interesting journey, I think, with India. There's a lot that they can learn from us, and I think there's a lot that we're going to be able to learn and grow from each other just because of the unique situations that are presented in the country.
And during this last 10 minutes or so here, a little less than 10, Stephanie, I'd like to go into a little on the Indoor Air Quality Association. I mean, things seem to be settling down now. We've got the, you're in the ASHRAE building there. Things seem to be working pretty well with administration of, dues and certificates for membership and so on. Where are we headed from here? What's the strategic plan for IAQA in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for your comments. Those are greatly appreciated. There's been many people working very diligently to get those types of administrative things in line. So I'm glad to hear your comments on those. As far as the strategic plan, I came on board almost exactly a year ago and worked with the board to develop a strategic plan that we could follow for the next 3 to 5 years. And the main strategic imperative for the association now is growth of the organization. And the tactics that we're using for that growth is really to create a value around the membership. We want to make sure that we're really, really making the membership value proposition as strong as it possibly can be, whether it's through tangible benefits such as the quarterly free webinars that we offer to all members, or a little more intangible things such as the network that IAQA brings to the table. We're really trying to build that, and we're also building the awareness of the association. We've really, really increased our level of communication to our membership and to our contact list in the last year, and we're getting out there. We've been at a lot of industry events, just really getting the word out about IAQA, that we're still here, we're growing, and we're ready to serve the members and the industry. The specific areas that we're targeting with the strategic plan are education and training, regulatory and industry affairs, and member engagement. These are really the top 3 aspects or reasons, if you will, why people come to any trade association. You come to learn, you come to make sure you're staying on top of what's going on in the industry, and you come to engage with others in the industry. And we want to make sure that those are the areas that we are serving the best or being the strongest in, since that's the main reason why most people will come to an organization like IAQA. Our education and training programs have been going extremely well since the beginning of the calendar year. We have our webinar series, which is a monthly webinar on various topics within the IAQ industry. We also, as I mentioned, have quarterly free webinars for members, which thank you, Joe Hughes, for presenting one of those yesterday for our membership.
My pleasure.
The popularity has also been increasing of the IAQA University courses. That's a very strong tenet of our educational program, are those 50 one-hour online courses that are really cover the fundamentals, the basics of IAQ. And what we've been doing is we've been featuring one IAQA University course in every month. And you can find that featured course within IAQA Digest, our member e-newsletter, and we're giving a little bit of a discount for a course in each month. So take a look at that. Make sure you just see what courses we're offering on a discount or featuring for the month. That program has greatly increased the popularity of the IAQA University courses. And then, of course, we have our on-site and online training courses. We have our approved training providers, of which IAQTI is one of them, our longstanding partner in the training courses. So we're very proud of what's happening with education and training now, and we're looking to develop it even more in the future. As far as member engagement, we've been on here talking about India. We've had a lot of development going on with chapters. I believe our chapters have grown 30% in the past 6 months. And a lot of that has been the international development that we've been speaking on today. It's funny because we had visitors in the ASHRAE office last week from CSP. So CSP is kind of the ASHRAE counterpart in the UK, and there's a staff exchange program between ASHRAE and CSP. And so we had a lot of meetings last week talking about the different challenges and things that we're facing as organizations, and it was discussed that CSP is also seeing most of its growth from the international segment, as is ASHRAE. ASHRAE is seeing faster and more growth in their international segments than they are seeing within North America. So that was a good confirmation that IAQA is really on the right path in pursuing these developing economies in other countries that are dealing with similar or maybe even unique indoor air quality issues that we're dealing with in North America. So member engagement, that's really another, that's one of the 3 main tenets of our strategic plan, is getting that local avenue of member engagement through your chapters. So if you're an IAQA member, please get involved with your local chapter. If you don't have a local chapter, we're always looking for motivated people that want to start a new chapter. because we know that's such an important network that we have to build as an organization. And our other member engagement topic that I'll talk about just real quickly is our annual meeting. Please plan to attend our annual meeting in January 30th through February 1st in Las Vegas. We are co-located with ASHRAE's Winter Conference as well as AHR Expo. So we hope to see everyone at the annual meeting next year in Vegas.
And that's a big one, number 20, I believe.
That's right.
20th anniversary. Hopefully we'll have some special things planned for that. I'd love to see some recognition of the past presidents, for instance. I noticed that was Cliff's trivia question today, and the correct answer was Larry Robertson, and Doug Conan picked that one up, and Eva was second on it. But, I think we should honor those folks on a regular basis, maybe have a poster or something that, shows the history of the organization. Larry's passed away, unfortunately, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for where we're at today. Cliff, let me turn it over to you. We're just about out of time. In fact, we may run a minute or two over. I want to give you the opportunity to ask the last questions.
Thanks, Joe. Stephanie, the excitement is evident in your voice that you're having a good time with your tenure at IAQA. What has been the most rewarding part of your job since you've been there? If you had to name one thing, what is it?
Oh, that's hard to single it down to one. But what I would say is really my general answer for why I like working for associations, and that's because I say that working for an association is one of the best jobs on the planet, because with this role, you are working with people that are passionate about what they do. So every single day, I'm working with people that are passionate about what they do, people like you, Joe, Don, and that is infectious. So that is, I think, my favorite thing about working for associations, period, and it's my favorite thing about working for IAQA, is just being surrounded by members and volunteers that are passionate about what they do is really, really inspiring and motivating every single day.
Great answer. Thank you.
And with that, let me just throw out a final question to either of our guests or both. Please, if there's anything you'd like to add before we go, anything we missed, here's your chance. Dawn?
I think we've covered it pretty well. I think that the one thing I would add, and probably Stephanie may add it as well, is we're looking at opening up new chapters internationally very shortly. I think we're going. Stephanie's going to Shanghai to open a chapter soon. We're working closely with some folks in Australia to open a chapter there. There's a new chapter in Vancouver. The Los Angeles chapter is opened up again. So I think the growth is there. Come and join us and participate, and you'll see how fast this particular organization is growing.
Thank you, Dawn, and thanks for joining us. Stephanie, any last words from you?
Yeah, I think those were great last comments from Don. I should, mention that I'm leaving for Shanghai on Monday to open up the Shanghai chapter. I will then be going on to Hong Kong to speak to some government representatives there about IAQA getting involved with their IAQ issues they're dealing with. And then I'm on to Bangkok for the ASHRAE Super CRC, where I'm hoping to talk to a lot of interested people about IAQA and forming a chapter. But just again, to confirm Don's comments here, we're here, we're growing, and we're here to serve the members and the industry. So please reach out if you're interested. Let us know if you want to get more involved. We have a Get Involved page on our website that outlines all the different opportunities. So come join us and let us know what we can do to serve you as a member better and to serve the industry.
Well, with that, I just want to thank both Dawn Weeks and Stephanie Sears. It's been great to have you on the show. And Stephanie, it was nice to be able to spend a little more time with you this time around. We didn't get to hear a whole lot from you the first time you joined us, so it was great to have you back.
Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you, Dawn. And, of course, thanks to my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. Well done again, Cliff. I'm sure you're writing up a bunch of notes over there. Our engineer, John, you got to have faith. Well done, John. No glitches, except my computer started to blow up here. I don't know why. It was making all kinds of crazy noises. We'll have to figure that one out before next week. But this is Radio Joe Hughes saying thanks, and most importantly to our loyal listeners. Come back and join the Z-Man next Friday at noon. I'll be on the road teaching, so the Z-Man's going to cover for me. I'm sure we'll have some good disaster restoration discussion next Friday at noon on the next episode of IAQ Radio.
This has been another IAQ Radio production.